Hey all, I'm your host, Tyler Olson, and this is a good problem to have. Today, I'm going to be having a conversation with a couple of which I have known anonymously for several years, especially around the context of financial decisions, the path to financial independence that Joe in particular has shared on Twitter. But Joe and Josie are with me today, and we're going to be talking about a particularly good problem to have. Um, we're going to be talking about what to do with a gift of $250,000 when you're already well on your way to financial independence, and yet there are some decisions to make. And we're going to be that's the peak of our conversation. We have some other things to talk about first, but in any case, Josie and Joe, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thanks, Tyler, for having us.
Yeah, and I've really, we as I as I get to know each of you and like your, even before we started recording, and you were sharing some thoughts on like how you think and why, what motivates the financial decision making that you're going through right now. I can appreciate that you're looking at money decisions through the lens of um, of non-money values, and really those are the things that really matter most, because money comes and goes. But um, I I wanted to be able to start our conversation with understanding where both of you come from, because like to get to a point where now we're like, you two have amassed a a a very respectable degree of wealth at this point through your career development and financial decisions. But I'd love to get some context and see like where you started from that has led you to this point. So um, whichever one of you wants to start, like who'd like to say, like like where would you say that your financial journey began as it relates to this conversation?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start. So just for a little background on myself, I'm an ER doctor in the Southeast. About 5 years out from residency, almost 6 years out from residency now. I think I started getting interested in finance when I was a resident. I think mainly because I had so much student loan debt, which ended up being just over $300,000. And that's kind of where my initial, interest in finance and personal finance um, really began. And then, Melissa, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I am also working in healthcare. I won't specify too much, but I have been working in healthcare with my degree for almost 15 years now. I grew up in New England. So a little bit background about me and where I came from. So my parents immigrated here from Portugal, but so very hardworking family background. Money was tight when we grew up. We grew up in a small apartment, and my father worked very hard. So that was something that was instilled in me at a very young age. And I'd say right after I graduated college, I had a plan that I wanted to kind of specialize in my career, but instead of specializing, I kind of took one route that allowed me to make a little bit more money so that I could actually pay off my almost 150 grand in student loans in just 4 years. My parents were nice enough and generous enough to let me take out a home equity loan against their house because they had paid off their mortgage in just 10 years. And I was able to do that actually in almost 3.5 years. So before I met this average Joe, I was essentially debt free. I just had my house mortgage, and I was well on my way to, I think, a pretty good financial path.
Yeah, those are good examples to be around when we're young, to see a good work ethic, a financial responsibility, within one's ability to be able to reduce debt. And if your folks paid off their mortgage that quickly, obviously that was now, did you know that was happening? Like, did they communicate these sort of things to you, or did you just kind of hear about it a little bit?
Yes, my parents were very open with communication and money just because we didn't really have much when I was young. So, I knew like that factor around a lot of decisions. I was raised kind of by my family. My mother always worked, immediately after having me, she went back to work. So my grandmother kind of raised me. And my father actually took a good chunk of time to build our family home. So
Mm.
it was basically just my mom's salary for a couple of years while my dad built our family home.
Wow.
So I was very aware of everything. They weren't secretive. I could tell you at any given time what their checkbook was, how much it had, even when we progressed onto digital banking and I had their logons, and I know I could tell you now how much my dad has in his retirement account. That's just something my parents have always been open about. And I think that
Hmm.
that's important because, I wasn't sheltered around that. And I was raised in a way that you worked hard for your money and then you didn't spend it foolishly and you pay down debt. I made the joke the other day with Joe that I think my dad didn't have a debit card until 10 years ago. He always used to say, if I don't have cash, I'm not buying it.
Hmm.
And now we kind of still have that same mindset, but the credit cards all have these great offers nowadays. If we can not have interest on a credit card and we can max it out like we did when we built our house and put all of our furniture and stuff on there and invest that money instead of paying it off right away, we do that. But I think a lot of the similar concepts that I learned and was exposed to growing up are still very alive within me today.
Yeah, that degree of transparency, that is not common. Like
No.
between parents and kids, or at least in my, I should say, it's not common in my own experience and around like other people that I have heard about. But I can see that can be that that can be very educational, and yeah, and not to be, I guess maybe like to learn how to not be ashamed about not being able to buy something right away, like, but just to appreciate that it's just the reality and the time, and
Yes,
helps to make prudent decisions. Does that track?
exactly. 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 You know, we didn't take a family vacation every year, but that doesn't mean we didn't, go away or do like little trips here and there. We did what we could afford. And, you know, Mike will joke all the time that I still live like we're on a resident salary, like he's still a resident, not making much money. And I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. He'll say I'm way too frugal, but, I think that's helped us get to where we are too.
Mm, yeah. How did you feel about it when you wanted to buy a boat? Now I'm really curious.
So the boat story is very funny. I feel like I'm doing all the talking, but
That's okay.
we went to a boat show, and I kid you not, we had a certain figure. I'm not even going to say it out loud because it still sends chills down my spine. But we had a set number that we had been saving up for a couple of months, and it was a pretty precise number. It's not like 200,000. It wasn't 50,000. It was
We can
almost
tell.
almost down to the dollar. Okay, it was ninety three
It was
thousand dollars,
93,000.
and we saw a boat that was perfect for our family. Mike loves to fish. I'm more of I got on the fishing. I got on board with fishing when I met him. Okay, but keeping in
Hmm.
mind that we were going to have a family, seating was important to us. A boat that was sort of safe for our future kids was important as well. And we found this boat at a boat show, and Mike goes, "What's the best price you can do?" And I kid you not, after everything he wanted and taxes and trailers, the amount was $93,000. And I said, "All right, well then I guess this is the one.
Yep.
Don't add a single thing."
We have the exact cash ready to go.
Yeah. So yeah. So kind of bringing in that concept I learned when I was younger, we're not going to finance this boat. Once we have this money saved and once, we're at a good place financially, we can buy this boat. And that was almost 3 years ago. It'll be three
Hmm.
years in September. So I guess 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. Um, Mike, how did that process, like, did you have, like, were you already kind of set in your mind where you knew like, hey, this is the right way, this is the way that 100% on board with already to be like, we got to save up the cash and then buy it? Or did it take some persuasion? Curious.
Um, it was certainly a huge decision, but we had recently moved to the southeast on the water, and that was one thing that Melissa supported, saying it's like we moved here for this reason, so we could be on the water and have a boat. So I think Melissa supporting me through that decision certainly helped.
Sure, sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, I asked because so many couples that I have talked to over the years, or even clients of ours that we work with, there, there's, I mean, sometimes you're like, there's like a like it's possible to always just be like immediately like in agreement, but in most cases there are slivers of differences in how we approach money, and it doesn't mean that a solution cannot be arrived at. It just means that you have to talk about it
Mhm.
Yes.
and be able to like make a plan together that makes sense. And it sounds like you both have done that effectively. So
Yes,
very cool.
we try to make that a consistent factor in our marriage. We don't. He wouldn't go out and buy a new car and not discuss it with me, and I wouldn't do the same. You know what I mean? To say that we have a set amount of money that we talk about things. I'm not going to haggle him for buying all this stuff on Amazon, but I mean, and don't get me wrong, I like nice things. If I want a nice something, I don't know. I'm not big into purses, or I'm not that kind of materialistic person, but we do make it a habit of talking about big financial purchases together. And I'm not keeping track of him, he's not keeping track of me. I think it's just an important discussion to have, and always be aware of what the other person's doing. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are so secretive about that, and it's like then they'll get to the point and they're like, I don't know how we got to where we are. And it's like, well, how do you not know? you know
It is knowable. It's lots of little things that happen over days and weeks and months and then years, and then it becomes like a, well, like the wires behind your TV or stereo set. It just gets so messy, and you're like, I know that the pathways are knowable, but if we don't maintain, it gets really messy, and then you factor in emotions, and it can get a little tough to collaborate on financial decisions. So yeah, that's really good to know about like where you both come from. I guess my next thought is, like, you've maintained this, this routine and habit building of being prudent with spending and intentional with major purchases. um how did you handle then with those, with that foundation in mind, and then 6 years ago, Joe, you transitioned to attending hood, approximately, right? And
Right.
but now 6 years later, I'm looking at your net worth, because you know and for our listeners, just so you know, we went through a process where we actually did like a full data gathering, not too dissimilar from what we'll do with us with our clients, just because I really wanted to know the minutia. And your net worth is substantial now. um do you share that publicly? Can I say what
Yeah.
your net worth is? It's your net worth is north of 3 million now. 6 years. So what did you do transitioning to attending hood that you think has led to this?
So I think the big thing is I just worked a lot at the end of the day. It's just, the average ER doctor makes around 400,000, but if you work, around 20% more, you can make 500 or, 600,000 depending on how you're doing. And ever since I graduated, I basically picked up every single shift that I could, every single day that I had open, I was picking up shifts. So I just, you know, it's just like I said, it's just that mentality that I want to get my loans paid. I want to invest every single dollar that I have, and I just work more. And
Mm-hmm.
and I've kind of talked about before is, okay, now my loans are paid. Now my net worth is increased so much. Now is it okay to pull back a little bit? And that's kind of what I've been doing this past year. But really, the first 5 years, I just worked like crazy, and they would really, you know, that's the answer. Um, just in general. Do you have anything else to add?
Yes, I have two things to add. So I'll add that I have been working 10 years, not including your residency. So, we're talking about our full-time job capability here, 10 years more than Joe has. So I would say that I had a pretty good little financial nest for us. But before Mike became an attending, I've always worked. When I started my first job in my career, I immediately started pulling out at least 20% into retirement. And, then I had money for rent, and then I had money for my loans. And that's pretty much all I did. So, I mean, I hustled too. And let me tell you, I hustled in school too. A lot of people don't work when they're in school. And I mean, I had two jobs. I worked at a retailer, and then I went home every other weekend and I worked at a hospital. And I did that for almost 4 years throughout my schooling. So pretty much all I did was school and work.
Mm.
Is that the best thing? Maybe not, but I mean, I know that certainly helped. And I do want to add that ever since you were young, too, your dad also started a certain fund for you. I don't think that you mentioned that.
Roth IRA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
My dad was also, you know, interested in investing, and so I think that's kind of a little bit where my financial background came too. So that's
Mm.
why we never got involved in like real estate much besides our primary home, but I always believed and kind of understood the stock market. So that's the other thing is we've invested essentially every extra dollar that we've had in the stock market, and if you look at the last 3 years, really the last 5 or 6 years has done really, really well besides 2022. So I
Mhm.
think that's,
Yeah.
a big portion of it is we worked a lot, we made above what our, respective jobs make, and then we invested all that money.
Yeah. And I bought a
Mhm.
house probably about 6 years ago that we sold before moving to the Southeast. And it was at a time where houses were selling for a lot of money. And I actually sold it
Mm.
on my own, remarkably. I had no real estate experience, but I sold the house and I made about 200 grand, which covered our land where we are now. So, I mean, we
Mm.
started out really well here, and graciously my parents let us live with them for about a year and a half while we built. So some people would just say, "Oh, that's great. You saved so much money. You probably got to spend more." And we actually didn't, because I was pregnant and stopped working like a month before I was due, thankfully. But the whole time we were building our house, we actually paid our mortgage and more than what we had to pay off of our construction loan. So we paid the interest, and then any extra money we had this certain number in mind, like we wanted it to be under 800. So we did everything we can to get it under 800 before we moved in.
Mm. Okay. I want to make sure that I'm clear that I think that what you're building here is very high quality and the trajectory is steady. Um, but I think it would be inaccurate. Like initially, I was thinking through the mindset of this has happened in 6 years, but it hasn't happened in 6 years. It's more like 16 years.
Mhm.
Is
I
that
would say
accurate?
I would say even further. I mean, how old are you when your dad opened up your Roth IRA? You were young,
I was probably in high school.
high school.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean, I think it could go
Yeah.
all the way back to that. I know
Yeah.
I know mine would start probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to be fair, it was maybe 20 grand. It wasn't a ton. It wasn't a huge.
But I think what
Yeah.
Tyler is getting at is that you can't even just look at we've amassed this wealth in
Mhm.
6 years since you've become an attending. It's really our whole life.
Hmm.
A lot of people can learn a lot in 6 years, and you can save as much as you want or work as much as you want. But if you don't have these good foundations, and if you don't learn these things early on in life, you know, he made a post once and I took a screenshot of it because I'm like, I'm going to say this to our son. Our son is very young. He's still in preschool. But he posted once that his grandfather was a coal miner. His father worked in a factory. Our son's going to grow up privileged. but he's going to know, the importance of a hard day's work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, we're always talking about how, Mike's like, I want to put away 10K every year for his college. And my parents paid for half of my college. But what I think is really important too is that we just don't give him all the money. Like, yes, we want to be able to pay for most of his college. Who knows how much it's going to cost by the time he gets there. But
Mm-hmm.
we've talked about even saying, when he's done, giving us $1,000 a month as a payment kind of back. And then once, we come up with a certain number, you know what I mean? Just
Mm-hmm.
making sure that he understands what we understand and how we were raised, and not just that we go to the store and you get everything that you want, because that's not what's important.
Mm. Yeah,
If that makes sense.
it does. Yeah, there's a lot of first generation medicine professionals, like the two of you, have shared similar sentiments where there's a lot of things that you learned um, that the environment almost required it. And
Yes.
now you're creating this new environment for your child, and you have some latitude with how it looks and feels. And you got to step carefully. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you for sure. And yeah, so you're right. You're right, Josie. What I was intimating is that it is, Joe, you mentioned like 20,000 for the Roth IRA, and
Mhm.
like, you're also like, I appreciated what both of you said about like what it has taken to get here. Like, it's not about the money amount early on, it's about the habits. It's
Yes.
about the mindset, and it's about communication.
Yes.
And then when you go from, I think I surmise that when you were still in training, Joe, your household income was not like, you weren't single, so it wasn't like you're just living on 70,000. You were probably living on like maybe like 210, something like that, with a dual income. But still, the jump from that to like where like 700, something like that at this point, that requires discipline
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah, I mean,
already exists.
yeah, yeah, and I think you also feel that lifestyle creep because I graduated, became an attending, and we were talking about building a new house. I needed a new car. I had $300,000 in student loan debt, so I think I totally understand that lifestyle creep because that totally happens where you're totally repressed for so long in training. All of a sudden, you get out and you have this huge income, but the truth is you also have a lot of expenses that you got to catch up on so you get there. So even with that huge income, you still need to be disciplined. So it's 100% true.
Mm.
Yeah, and to just piggyback off of that, I think it's important to note too, similar things happened when I ended my career that happened a lot when I started my career. I'm sorry. That happened when Mike started his career. A lot of doctors, when they graduate, they see what they're making and they're buying the big houses and the expensive cars. And well, he did buy a new truck, which was well deserved. His truck was like 20 years old when he graduated residency. Um, I did the same thing. I didn't graduate and buy a big house or buy a brand new car. I bought it when I could afford it and when I was in a better position. And I think that that's something important to keep in mind. You say, when you just said, we're making $700,000. I still don't feel like we're making that. And Mike is always, telling me to stop being so frugal. But, like to this day, I still probably, when we go out to dinner, I don't usually get a drink because I'm like, it's such a waste of money. And he'll be like, the market's up 1%. We made $75,000 today. You can get a drink. And I'll be like, okay, but okay. He'll still have to say stuff like that to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's going to be very hard for me to change that, maybe in another 10 years or so.
Yeah.
But, the last thing I want to add here is that I don't know how he does Twitter because the trolls just drive me insane. But, when he posted this question to get feedback, a lot of people are like, if you have this kind of money, if you're making 600 grand a year, why do you even have a mortgage? And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that if you're not smart with your money, if you're not seeing someone like Tyler, half of that is going to go to taxes. So we're not taking home 600,000. We're probably not even taking home half of that. We invest aggressively. So when someone says they make 600,000, they're not taking that home. Like that's not how much is going to their bank.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, and the reality as you go through it definitely feels different, and it's not just because it's just like oh it's just my gut how it feels. It actually is different. So
Yeah.
it's good to be prudent and to not this is one of the reasons why I'm regularly talking about attendings not just jumping into a home purchase in a brand new place with a brand new job where they know nobody and they have no connections just because you gotta take it slow because major purchases that you end up reversing are expensive and yeah it can be problematic but anyway I could go on and on.
Yeah, that made me think of one more thing. Let me add it before I forget it.
Yeah.
It might speak more to this, but almost every shift, he'll work with. There's the doctors that are in their 70s still working because unfortunately they know nothing else. I don't think they're doing it financially, but then there's the doctors in their 50s that are still working full time, and he's constantly saying, "I don't want to do that." But we talk about why they're still working. And I think probably you could say 50% of the time, a lot of them is because marriages didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think financial decisions are important, but personal decisions are also important. What would you say the most important thing you do in life is?
Who you marry?
Yeah.
My wife is the reason for my success.
Oh, geez. Stop. Trying to earn brownie points here. No, but it's so true. He works with some doctors that are on their second or third marriage and they're like 50s and 60s, and he's like, that's why they're working. They're paying 2 alimonies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or they're supporting their 40-year-old children.
Yep. I always say, I always say, one of the best risk mitigation tools is date night.
Yes.
Yeah, gotta keep it alive.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the friendship strong, and make it real. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Josie. So I'd like to move on now to this decision. You have a gift incoming of $250,000, and the context of the gift, which I haven't shared yet, is super important. Would you mind telling me about that, Josie?
Sure. So my parents, a big part of their success, not only has been making smart financial decisions, but also real estate. So my father immigrated here. He worked in a labor job. I will say that I won't go too much into specifics, but he worked long hours. But they got into real estate and they just made out really well. And I think that's not something nowadays that people can do just with the real estate market and the stock market. But so my parents are selling their primary home and downsizing. They are in their 60s and 70s. So, looking to downsize and kind of consolidate things, but the gift will be coming from a part of the sales proceeds from their primary residence.
So it's like a legacy gift.
In part, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now looking at your overall financial picture, you have substantial levels of investments. Your only debt now at this point is your mortgage, which stands at around $750,000, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And
that still sends chills down my spine.
yeah, so what do you want to do with the money?
So we had to talk about it quite a bit, and we are leaning towards just putting it on the mortgage. And our thought was to get the mortgage down to 500, or and maybe take a little bit more from our income or investments and pay it down a little bit more, and then recast it and kind of drop our payment, because our payment is a little under 4,000 a month right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we could recast it at no cost, and maybe drop it down to 2,000 a month, and just kind of lower our monthly expenses, which I totally understand. And I don't think we said it yet, but our mortgage rate is 3.75%. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a pretty good mortgage rate that you can't get these days. So I totally understand. There's the spreadsheet. You put it in a spreadsheet. The investments are probably going to grow faster than the mortgage, but there's something about the psychology of paying down that debt. Like I said, it's when we hear that number 750, it kind of gives us chills, and so we're leaning towards paying it down right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I understand. Yeah, I mean, just for the sake of the conversation, it looks like how many years do you have left on the mortgage? Actually, I should. Do you know? Oh, you bought it in
So I think
2022, right?
yeah, so it's probably about 26 years.
It's a 30-year
26
mortgage.
years.
It's a 30-year
Okay.
mortgage. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been here almost 3 years. So we
Okay.
started with a construction loan about a year before we
Okay.
moved in.
So like over over the course of that time, you're looking at by making that payment, by recasting, um I've estimated that your savings, your interest expense savings is going to be somewhere in the order of like $140,000 over the life of the mortgage. So it's not small at all. Um, but to your point about like, yeah, you've run the calculations, and I know that you've already arrived at what you want to do. So I'm I'm not. I want you to know too. I'm not necessarily trying to change your mind. I think it's interesting to talk about
Mm-hmm.
the an investment of $250,000 can grow well over $1 million in 20 years. So money wise, sure, that could make sense, but what, like, let's say, just for example's sake, that the net difference of your decision from a wealth standpoint in the year 2046 is that you've got 10 million in net worth instead of 11.
Mm-hmm.
There's the answer right there.
Why?
Is our life, I think it's going to be more than 10 million in 20 years, at least I hope it is. But when we're 60, if we have 10 million versus 11 million, is that really going to change our life? No, it's not. But if we have a $2,000 mortgage payment next year, and again, knock on wood, and something happens to Joe, like he gets into an accident and he loses a leg or an arm and he can't work, that burden of a $4,000 versus a $2,000 mortgage payment, that's a big factor. And that's a big influence in our decision here, is that we work in healthcare and we see how quickly life can change on a day-to-day basis. And that's also another factor, is because we see that, it's important for us to be able to live now in the present and not just constantly be thinking about the future, which is something we've done for so long and how we were raised. But planning for the future is important, but being able to live now and have less stress and less burden is just as important, if not more, to us.
I can really appreciate that. Yeah. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that there's a security in having less debt, and that's kind of what I'm thinking about, and I think it's probably a bigger deal, when you're starting out, like those foundations that you build, and as we discussed, we've already built up our net worth. We have a nice nest egg for retirement that we built. So I feel like now that we're a little you know further ahead financially, um, like you said, if we have 11 million versus 10 million in 20 years, is it really going to matter? Is it really going to change our life? Probably not. But I think there's a security to, dropping those monthly payments, and having less debt overall, just in case something, whatever happened to one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not
Yeah.
just solely focusing on the mortgage either. We could continue our lives on just my salary if something happened to Michael. And we could continue on just his salary if something
Mm-hmm.
happened to me. We have disability insurance. We have long-term insurance. We have life insurance. We have all of those in place if something does happen. But I think it's looking at every possibility here, and it's not just looking at one aspect of this decision, which, like you said, if you plug it in, yes, we could make a lot more in the stock market. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
the here and now is really important to us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, much respect. I have a few questions after having looked over your what you shared with me that I think may be supportive of this decision. Just to make sure that and there might be just some things that I don't see that they are in place, but there might result in some suggestions that could be helpful to you. Are you up for that?
That's good.
Do you have an emergency fund? And if so, where is it?
So I think of my emergency fund as our brokerage account, which is it's usually between 450 to 500,000.
Uh-huh.
So at least in the beginning of the year, I usually dump all that cash into our investments because I try and front load all of our retirement accounts.
Okay.
And then as the year goes on, I kind of increase my cash cushion for tax payments and whatnot. I usually don't carry much cash in the beginning of the year.
Okay. So your thought process is that most emergencies within the realm of like what's likely to happen or what's most realistic risks that being able to, would you sell investments or would you take out a line of credit from do you have that set up with your like where your accounts are set up? Because I know where your investments are, you could set up like a securities backed line of credit. Have you
Yeah,
thought about
we
that?
have not set that up, but I think that could be a potentially good idea.
It's
Let me
good
ask
to,
this question. How much of an emergency fund are you talking about? Are you talking 10, 20 grand? Or are you talking 100 to 200 grand?
well, like no, I don't, especially like as your wealth grows, the
Yeah,
need for an emergency fund, the amount reduces.
right.
And then the other factor is employment stability, not as it relates to disability, we'll get to that, but as it relates to other factors that are out of your control. Now, Joe, you're technically self-employed, but you're in a line of work that is highly sought after. And Josie, I would say the same is true for you. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Yeah. So like having like $100,000 to $200,000 in cash, I don't think that is necessary.
No.
I find that the break, not the break, that's the wrong word, the gap between being able to work and being unable to work that would result in a disability policy being activated. The what they call the now I'm losing my thought on the phrase. The not the grace period. It's either, why am I blanking on what it is? It's either
The
90
waiting
days.
period. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, the waiting period of, either 3 months or 6 months, that is the most impactful risk in terms of like if it were to happen and you couldn't work. Now, sure, like functionally, you could live off of your salary, Josie, but to be able to not have to like run it like right to the edge of the checking account every month, unless you either sold stock, took out a line of credit, um, it might provide a little bit more peace of mind for the doing what you just said, the living in the now, like where, stock market fluctuations coupled with a disability, that's like the stressor for me. I know for myself personally, like that's why I have an emergency fund, is because of cash, because then I don't have to process the steps of selling assets, and I don't have to worry about thinking we're going to have to really ride the line for 90 days or 180 days just so that I can have an additional $40,000 in the stock market. What do you think of that?
Emergency fund, I always think of, 3 months of savings. So on average, give or take, we spend anywhere from 8 to 10,000 a month. That's not just bills, that's including, living expenses, groceries, Amazon purchases, everything. So to say, do we have 30,000 cash? I'd say probably the only month that we don't have that is January and February, because that's when we front load all of our investment accounts. So, starting next week, after
Yeah.
we get paid at the end of this week, the end of the month, we'll have that emergency fund going forward. And after these 2 months, we will probably have at the end of the year 150 grand in an emergency fund until we pay our taxes at the end of the year.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I guess we didn't really think about if anything happens in the first 2 months of the year, but I think at any given time, I would say that we have at least $10,000 in a checking account.
Yeah.
Mike will try and dry out the checking account like the other day, we almost bounced our checking account, overdrafted it. And I said, don't let that happen again, because every extra penny he has, he will put in the stock market, which is not a bad thing, but we need to have a little bit of a cushion here too.
Yeah, I like to front load all our investments in the beginning of the year, so we run light on cash. And I, just to kind of clarify with our taxes, I have run as an S corp, and I do a single payroll in December, so I pay all my taxes with a huge tax bill in December that I work out with my CPA. So usually that, I have a big cash cushion by the end of the year to be ready to pay all those taxes.
Okay. Yeah, well then I just happened to catch you with our data gathering at that one time of the year when cash is light. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. My second question is my next question is, do you have as much disability insurance as you could have?
I probably don't. I got that policy in residency, and I just haven't thought to increase it. And I probably should have more right now.
You absolutely should. Why do you disagree, Josie?
Because what he would get in disability would pretty much cover our expenses for the month.
Oh, you mean right now?
Right now, yeah.
True. Yeah. There does come a break-even point when wealth gets to a point where you don't need it anymore. I personally do not think that you're there.
Mm-hmm.
No.
I don't think that you're at a point where
we have a mortgage. No.
Right. I think that the amount of disability coverage that you should have needs to go well beyond what covers your expenses, because disability policies typically pay until age 65. And if you happen to encounter a life event that results in a disability that prevents you from doing your job, Joe, but you live a long time, that's going to create some issues. Not just because and not just because like you'll need to, obviously pay for life well beyond age 65, but because when you encounter a disability, life expenses also tend to go up. And then the other factor to consider is that, and this is our approach as far as disability insurance coverage. We want the people that we're working with to be able to use the disability payout to not just pay for expenses now, but to be able to keep saving as if you were working. And if you only have enough coverage to be able to pay for now, I mean, yes, you do have a very respectable amount of wealth, but $2.5 million when you're in your late 30s, right? Late 30s is it's not what it seems over the course of the next 50 plus years. So I think that might be worth considering. Just looking at, I mean, disability insurance is surely expensive, but an income, something that halts your income, where you would not be able to really save anymore, and there could in fact be higher expenses in life because of a disability. I think that is something worth looking into.
Yeah, that is a good point. And I do want to add, we kind of thought about the opposite happening. If Joe's always had a life insurance policy. I only took out a life insurance policy when I was paying down my student loans at the request of my parents, in case, because back then student loans just didn't get forgiven upon death.
Mhm.
So, they said you can take out a home equity line against our house, pay down your student loans as fast as you can, though, and we would like for you to take out a life insurance plan for the amount of whatever, I had at the time, almost 150 grand when I graduated in student loans. And I think your aunt actually mentioned this, what if something happens to me?
Mm-hmm.
I know Joe will be okay. My son will be okay. But that kind of waiting period, like you said, the 3 months to kind of process everything, maybe allow Joe to take some time off of work to get things in order and kind of look at life and make decisions. So that kind of inspired me to get life insurance through work. I was basically just covered at my salary, or no, because I'm considered part-time. I was covered at half of my salary. So then I bumped it up this year to my full salary. So I pay, a couple of dollars extra every paycheck. So I mean, that's kind of something that we didn't even think about. But when his aunt mentioned it, who's also in financial planning, it was kind of like, yeah, that's right. If I have a life insurance policy of 150 to 200 grand, that's going to greatly, you know, provide a sigh of relief if something ever happens to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would Joe be okay? Yeah, but it's nice to have
Cushion.
that insurance.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that it's not just about like income replacement. It's like very substantial changes in life dynamics, and no matter what level of income each spouse has, there are huge intangible contributions, especially mothers, that are not valued economically, but they are huge when all of a sudden they're not able to do it. And it's like, duh, like, I mean, that's a whole separate conversation that we could delve
Yeah,
into.
yeah, that was thought about too. We do have a nanny that comes a couple of days a week while we work, but yeah, we probably have to put our son in either full-time care with her or full-time school, and that's a little bit more money. So
Yeah.
that is something we thought about too. And hope I don't get off track with this, but this morning while I was thinking about preparing for this, I was outside doing some landscaping work. Michael roll his eyes. But I watched the documentary yesterday that Eric Dane did I don't know if you've seen it, but it's pretty moving. It's kind of some final words. Do you know who Eric Dane is?
No, I don't.
Really? McSteamy from Grey's Anatomy?
Oh, that's right. Did he die?
Died, and he filmed a documentary of his last words that he wanted his daughters to hear, and that was only to be released upon his death. So it was just released within the last week, and there's been not just him, but also a couple of weeks ago there was another famous actor that passed away, James Van Der Beek, of cancer, and there's been all the speculation that these two prominent actors who've probably amassed so much wealth both have GoFundMe's going. And I think that that's something to think about, and it kind of piggybacks off of what you've been saying. You get used to this lifestyle and having certain things and doing certain things, and then you don't have the primary person who's been providing for you. One of the actors had 6 kids, and no matter how much money you have, 6 kids is still 6 kids. They're expensive, and eventually that money, when it's no longer coming in, needs to come from somewhere. So I think that's also something that kind of makes you go, huh? I think one of them was geared more towards healthcare costs, and we won't go down that alley. But, money is something that everybody needs to think about, even actors that make millions and millions of dollars a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's sobering for sure. And now I remember my wife was actually mentioning that about Eric Dane dying. So I was
I know most people don't know him as Eric Dane.
Yeah, if you said McSteamy out the gate, I'd be like, oh yeah.
McSteamy, yes. Mark Sloan, Dr. Mark Sloan. Everybody would know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that documentary is pretty
well,
moving.
I think that like a thorough life insurance analysis and disability insurance analysis would be worth your time to at least consider your options. Like there's one other thing that I wanted to share with you before we conclude, and that is that you want to consider the potential benefits of some asset protection strategies and how you title your investments and property. And what I'm referring to is that there are some, now this may or may not apply to you because I don't know exactly what state you're in. I know you said the Southeast, but there are some states, then this may apply to you, where you can title property as what's called tenancy by the entirety. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of that before, yeah.
I am, yes.
Okay. So what it basically does is it allows you to be able to both own property, like your home, 100%. Like in the eyes of state law, if you're in a state that allows this, 100% of the home is owned by you, Josie, but also 100% of the home is owned by you, Joe. The reason why this matters is because if either of you, being in medicine, this is unfortunately a risk to consider, if either of you were ever sued, your primary property, if it's titled as tenancy by the entirety, could not be levied because the other spouse owns 100% of it. It's not even like a 50-50, oh, this is my primary residence, so a judge is probably not going to allow them to force me to sell my property in order to pay off this lawsuit or whatever. The judge cannot do that because a person who is not involved in the lawsuit 100% owns that property. It is an excellent asset protection strategy that may be applicable to you. Just wanted to share that piece as well. So
yeah, that's super helpful. We won't answer whether or not that applies to us, but we will say that that's some really important advice, especially if you live in a state where that is a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, as far as the decision of like paying off the mortgage with the $250,000, I am 100% behind that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think you've laid out habits that you've been building for years, and you've built wealth and you're going to continue doing so. And even on like an analytical level, because we do like, I don't know if you heard of Monte Carlo, there's like a Monte Carlo analysis process where we can look at differences in like probability of success. And it has some value. It's not everything, but it has some value. And you know how much of a difference it made for your probability of success?
Probably really small.
Zero
I was,
difference.
yeah.
So do what will help you to feel like you're making the most of your life. And you already said that that means getting your mortgage in a much lower state and reducing that pressure. By all means, I love how you're proceeding here. So for what it's worth.
Awesome.
Yes, Tyler. Health is wealth. Remember that. Remember that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for taking some time to talk with me today. This was a very fruitful conversation.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk next time.